I'm Valerie Francis. I'm a writer and a story editor, and I teach women who are writing in all genres how stories work so they can finish the books faster and without frustration.
And I'm Melanie Hill, writer, editor, and poet, and I help writers identify and solve their story problems.
This week, we're doing things a little differently. It is an extra special episode this week because we are celebrating two things. Melanie just had a birthday, so happy birthday, Melanie.
Thank you. I don't celebrate them as much anymore.
Well, you wanted to celebrate this one because on your birthday, a very special box arrived on your doorstep. It was a box of copies of her brand new novel.
Yay! Isn't it beautiful? It's so good.
It is beautiful. It is beautiful. I'm so happy for you. Oh, listen, if you have not seen Melanie's unboxing video on socials, go check out her Instagram account at Melanie Hill Author. Oh, I was in tears watching it. I'm just so happy for you, and I'm so proud of you. You have worked so hard on this MF book.
I know, I'm on the verge of tears every time I talk about it.
Happy tears, I hope. Tears of joy.
Yes.
And maybe a bit of relief. So when you watch your unboxing video, let it be an inspiration for you. It is very inspirational because Melanie's worked really hard on this. It's a middle grade book called Jett Cooper, and Melanie's journey started 11 years ago on this book. That's 11 years ago she had the idea, and now she's holding it in her hands. Now, this is a huge accomplishment, absolutely huge. Very few people, and I mean very few, have the tenacity to stick with a book this long. Very few people are willing to do the work, the hard work that it takes to have an idea for a story. Lots of people say, oh, I'd like to write a book. I have a really great idea. Very few people can actually take that idea and create a full-length novel from it and see it brought to market. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. And in your case, Melanie, it involved your journey involved a page one rewrite, which is not a lot of fun. It's not a lot of fun. I can tell you right now. The idea of having to start over, most people will just cut and run there, but not you, Melanie, not you. So you and I met back in 2019, and when you hired me to be your editor, and I'm actually the one who gave you the page one rewrite.
Yeah, you weren't my favorite person there for a while.
No, I can imagine. But you've forgiven me, obviously. You're still talking to me.
Absolutely.
Although I'm sure you had some impure thoughts there for a while. That's okay. I can take it. Now, if you have listened to the archived episodes that went out in August, you would have heard Melanie talking about Jett Cooper in the intros that she did for that. And now the book is a real thing. It is out in the world. So, Melanie, for our discussion today on Jett Cooper, maybe a good place to start is with the page one rewrite. Now, if my memory serves, I didn't explicitly tell you have a page one rewrite. What I tried to do is sort of gently lead you in the direction of coming to that realization yourself. I do remember you saying to me, though, you mean I got to start over? And I said, yeah, you do. So how did it feel knowing that you were facing a page one rewrite? Now that you're at the other end of it, do you think it was worth it? What did you learn about yourself as an artist in that process? And what did you learn about the craft of storytelling?
Oh, they are very big questions, right? But they're very big questions. But I remember that time when when I worked out for myself that I needed to do a page one rewrite, and I was pretty upset about starting almost from scratch again. But I was very determined about learning to write a better story and just keep getting better. Because the reason that I first went to you was because I knew something wasn't right. I knew something wasn't working, and I'd done everything that I felt that I could at that point in time to better myself. And so I just needed some help. And so while I was upset about it, if I'm really honest, I wasn't surprised, because I just knew that it wasn't working in the form that it was in. Hence, why I engaged you to help me work out what that was. But there were so many things that I learned along the path, right? So the first thing we had to tackle after we got over the big hurdle was, what genre is it? So what sort of story am I trying to write? And it took me a few weeks to decide, but I had to decide between whether it was a performance story or a worldview story. And it had elements of both, but I had to pick one. I couldn't do both. I had to pick one which was going to take priority. And so I decided that it was going to be a performance story. So from there, right, we went and analysed the movie Coco, which is really not something, when you read Jett and then if you go and watch the movie Coco, that you would see that there is a parallel between them, but there actually is, from a storytelling principles perspective. So we analysed that really deeply, and we worked out how each scene played out, how the forces of antagonism complicated the story, how Coco acted, and what led to the climactic moment. So I had to make, though, a lot of mistakes and get a lot wrong in order to move forward. And that wasn't easy, but I kept doing it. Now, in my own time, while Valerie and I were developing this new manuscript, and as I was going along as well, after we'd finished our time together, I also broke down I broke down things on my own. So I did my own sort of study, and I watched Top Gun, I watched Eddie the Eagle, Strictly Ballroom, How to Train Your Dragon, $1 Million Baby, Rocky, Paper Planes, and Whiplash. So I really tried to focus on performance stories, and where I could, I would try and look at things that had flying in them as well, which is a lot harder than you think. There's not that many things out there that include flying as a principal element of the story. But I also read, right? I'm a writer, so I also read middle grade performance stories. So that was books about ballet, books about soccer. I read the entire Specky McGee series. And for those of you outside of Australia, that is a 14-book series about a 14-year-old boy who wants to be an Aussie rules football player. I went all in on these stories, right? I read Ender's Game, which was also an excellent book to read about practicing and competing. And it included life and death stakes, which was really important to consider for my book as well, because, if you fall out of the sky, the stakes are pretty high and it's pretty hard to survive something like that. So these were all the things that I was thinking about as I was trying to write my novel, and I was trying to learn more about the genre and the type of story that I wanted to tell. And then I had to look at, I still needed an internal genre. So Jett has to mature in this story. And I had to really work out a way to show Jett growing. And I did the hero's gift express. I had to think about how to work with grief in the novel as well. And this provided me with a way to give the characters conflict that originated from within, but could also be expressed externally. And the main way that I do that is via Jett's relationship with his mum and also his best friend, Ella. So that took a bit of time to work that out as well. Now, the first draft with the new structure had a lot of holes in it. So I had to write 4 more drafts to get the story spine working and also flesh out the details and connect all of the smaller story events. So there was also decisions about the story that I really deferred until later drafts. So I didn't decide on the point of view until I had all the scenes fleshed out enough. I really struggled with deciding what point of view I was going to use for this story. And up until I decided what point of view I wanted, I had some scenes written in first-person point of view, but the story is actually in close third person and close past tense. So, but while I was writing the drafts. I gave myself the freedom not to worry about that, but there did come a point where I had to make a decision, and I found that really difficult. But once I settled on it, everything then fell into place, and rewriting the first person scenes became a lot easier. I also deferred the decision about present or near past tense. I find tense one of the most difficult aspects of writing. I really struggle with tense, and I didn't want to be worried about this while I was trying to get the story down. So sometimes I needed to write a scene in a different tense or point of view to understand what happened. But again, once I made that decision, then I had to go through and rewrite for tense consistency as well. But the time when I did make the decision, I was ready to make it, so it made it a little bit easier. Yeah, so it's a lot, right? That's a lot, but that's a lot over a long period of time. I just want to remind people. But the most intense and the best part of the story came out, it really got momentum from 2019 onwards. But that's a lot of things. And I learnt, and I forced myself to learn a lot about writing in that time, because I really wanted this book to be a good book, a good story. So, yeah.
You gave it to me a couple of weeks ago, the final version, and I was actively avoiding talking to you about it because I wanted to keep the conversation for now, right? For when we were
Yep.
recording, because there's, and of course, I don't want to spoil it for, this is the podcast that spoils stories, but I'm not going to spoil this for people because I want people to read it. Because you've done such a good job here, Melanie. I mean, the manuscript that you came to me with was, I could see the areas that you had worked on and the areas, because those were working really well. But the overall structure of the story wasn't there because you hadn't worked on it yet. Because in the literary world, that's not something we talk about when you take a writing course. We learn the line writing there. We learn about description and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of writers tend to come to me with pretty strong skills in those areas, and you were one of them. But the weaker areas are the overall structure. Again, not because they're not capable of doing it, but because they just haven't learned it yet. So I just want to say I'm really proud of you for sticking with it and for doing all of the work, because it's not easy. Like this is not for the faint of heart. So listen, bravo you for sticking with it and for doing the hard work, and all of those stories that you just mentioned that you went and studied on your own. Very few people do that. You are in a very small class of writers. And that is why I know that whatever your goals are for yourself as a writer, you are going to achieve them because you are willing to do the work. Work does not scare you, my friend. It does not scare you at all.
No, it doesn't. Well, it scares me. I just do it anyway, right? It does scare me, but I just do it anyway. And thank you. You liked it then, because I've been hanging out. Going, she hasn't mentioned it. She actually read it. I don't know. Is it terrible? Is that why she's not mentioned it?
No, it really wasn't why I hadn't mentioned it. It was really because I wanted to actually tell you as close to face to face as possible through, a video call, which is as close as we can get. I just think you worked really hard, and all of that hard work, Melanie, it is showing in this book.
Mm-hmm.
And the next book that you write is not going to take you nearly as long, and it's not going to be, it won't even take, it will take a fraction of the time. And the first draft that you write is going to be really strong because of all of the lessons that you've learned. You're starting at a much more advanced skill level, a much more knowledgeable writer, a much more experienced writer now coming into your next book. Because, you talked about point of view and tense. Mm-hmm. And the only reason I'm curious to hear your thoughts as to why you were toying with present tense. Because when I ask writers this, I've gotten only one answer. Well, I've gotten two answers. One is that they write in present tense because they think they're supposed to, because that's the types of books that they're seeing right now. They're all in present tense. Or if they've given it any sort of critical thought at all, they're saying that they're writing in present tense to create a sense of urgency, to sort of force narrative drive onto a story.
Mm.
I mean, I don't blame them. Narrative drive is tough. It's tough to create. It's tough to keep a reader reading all the way through your book to the end. But present tense is not a cure-all.
No.
If your story doesn't have the elements it needs to create narrative drive, present tense is not going to create it for you. So, how did you come to that decision? What factors were you weighing up when you were thinking past tense, present tense?
So I think the immediacy, right, of the action. So I really wanted the flying scenes to be action, really give people a sense that they were in the cockpit and flying in the aircraft. So that was really the primary consideration for having present tense. But what I found was that it didn't give me much room for other things that I wanted. So the emotional reflection. So I felt that if I'm in present tense, then I'm not going to be able to convey the reflectiveness that Jett needs to go through to get to a point where he can talk to his mother and his mother can talk to him in a way that is important to show his growth arc. So that was really, for me, they were the two things that I was trying to weigh up and down. And I'm a Libran, so I always balance things out, right? So I'm always considering the pros and the cons, to the point where I drive myself crazy and then realize I have to make a decision. So I went with close past tense, and then that just did give me not just, I could do the flying scenes reasonably well and still create a sense of urgency, and I found a way to do that, and I'll talk about that a bit later. But it was really, I just wanted him to have that space. There was a realism between that relationship with the reader and what they were reading to create that sense that there was a reflectiveness. And I think that's why I chose past tense, because it could create that connection and it didn't need to be as immediate and shorten what I felt like was a pressure to be brief to keep that going. So does that make sense to you? And it was just really that simple. It was like, do I want immediacy of action or do I want reflectiveness? And I remember at the time I had writing friends who had started to write their books in present tense. And I did think, is that something that I need to do? Like, is that what the market is wanting? Right. And I felt there was a bit of pressure that way, but I just didn't think it served the story in the best way possible. And I really wanted the story to be good. So I chose in service of the story. That chose my point of view in service of the story.
And that every choice that we make must be in service of the story. And this is a really important skill that we're developing as we learn story theory and how stories work. Because if you want to be traditionally published, you're going to get an agent and you're going to deal with a publisher like an editor at a publishing house. They're going to have comments like, change it to present tense. You need to be able, because they're not story experts. I don't say that as a criticism. It's not their job. It's not their area of specialty. It's our area of specialty as the writers. So if they say, change it to present tense, then you've got to be able to say there's a strategic choice for me having used past tense. And it has to do with the genre and the maturation arc of my protagonist, which is going to fall flat if I use present tense for these reasons, just like you outlined. Because lots of times they make these suggestions because that's what is currently selling in the market, and they don't understand the impact that can have on a story. They also don't necessarily understand how much work that is.
Yeah. That's
change the point of view. Sure, give me a 6-figure advance, I'll change the point of view. Because that's like a whole year of work.
Yes.
on spec for nothing. Have you lost your mind? No. Right? And because it's sort of a castaway to them, or sort of a like a oh, like a I'm thinking like a flippant thought. That's kind of mean. I'm not intending to be mean here. But unless you've done it, you can't possibly appreciate how hard it is to do.
Yes.
So they don't really understand necessarily what they're asking or why they're asking it. So if they can say, if they say to you, put it in present tense, you can say, why? Give me story reasons why you think my story will be stronger in present tense. Right? This is the kind of conversation we need to be able to have with partners in the industry. Because if we can't, we're just going to be chasing our tail forever. And we'll never get anywhere with it. Okay. We could talk about this like for hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. But we've been talking a lot about like the craft already, but let's just take a little step back, because we haven't actually told anyone what this book is about. so
Very important.
Just give us an overview of the story so that people listening have a bit of context.
Okay. So in one,
without giving the story away.
I have to remember not to do that. Okay. So in one sentence, Jett Cooper wants to be an aerobatic race pilot, but when his father, who is a flying instructor, dies, Jett has to work a way around his mum's ban on all things flying so that he can compete in the first ever Blue Wolf Junior Air Competition and win a scholarship to the Elite Flying Academy. So that's the premise, right? That's my summary of my story in one sentence. But a more detailed explanation is that when Jett Cooper's father, Jack, tells him about the Blue Wolf Junior Air Competition, Jett is all in, as long as his best friend, Elateo, is in too. Now, Jett didn't expect that his father would die in an aircraft accident the following day, which then caused his mum to ban everything to do with flying, including the air competition. So flying is Jett's passion, which he shared with his dad, and he knows he can win the competition and get that scholarship, if only his mum lets him fly again. But his mum is dealing with her grief, and she's scared that Jett will make the same mistakes that Jack made. And she's trying to sell Jack's flying school and come to terms with the accident investigation, as well as managing Jett's 14-year-old defiance. Now, Jett would give up anything to fly just one more time. And with the help of his adventurous and slightly crazy auntie, Ali, Jett defies his mum and sets the flying world on fire for all of the wrong reasons. So Jett has to navigate the thrilling and dangerous world of competitive flying, earn the respect of his skeptical team lead, Charlie Dagger, and outfly his toughest rival and former best friend, Elateo. Each race, and there's a fair bit of racing, he has to push himself to his limits, and he has to test his ability and determination. And Jett's biggest discovery is that the competition isn't won on a race course, but inside himself. So the flying competition, right, is the focus of the story. But what the story is also about is a boy and his mum who are grieving at the loss of someone that they cared deeply about. So Jett wants to keep flying because he feels close to his dad when he's airborne. But his father speaks to him when he's in the cockpit and when he's flying. But Kathy, Jett's mum, is scared that she'll lose Jett in the same way that she lost Jack. So the different way that they deal with their grief is really at the heart of the story. So that's the internal conflict for both of them. So working out how to marry the internal and the external stories required a lot of thinking. I needed to set up the story at the beginning so that it could carry the external and internal storylines, or the A and the B story, all the way through. And Jett's relationship with Kathy is actually the key to seeing Jett's internal change. And once I realised all of this, then his actual internal change arc became a lot easier to plot. But I also wanted Jack, so Jett's dad, to be a character in the book, even though he's physically not present. So I found this interesting because most of the characters in the book have a relationship with Jack or had one, but their memories of him and their experiences of him are vastly different. So there are key moments in the story where Jett realizes that his dad wasn't the same for everybody. And Jett's 14, right? He's 14 years old, but he is capable of understanding as well that his father wasn't perfect. So that was a really interesting element of the story that was difficult to kind of work out. But when it did, I think everything clicked into place fairly well.
And it's part of his maturation. Right? That is part
Yes.
of the arc, of the character arc. All right. So one of the questions that I get, I know you get it too, from writers, is, like, how do you start? Where do you start? Like, do you start with the character? Do you start with the plot? And the answer is you start wherever you start. Like whatever germ of an idea comes to you first, that's where you launch from. So with Jett Cooper, where did you start? Were you like J.K. Rowling, where Harry walked into her head fully formed? Like, did Jett walk into your head fully formed? Was it the world that you wanted to write something about? Was it the age group that you wanted to write for? What got you on this path? What got you started on this path?
So Jett did walk into my head fully formed. He did. He literally did. And then I tried to
That's a
change
good
him.
omen.
And then I tried to change him and I tried to make Jett female. And that just did not work. It just didn't. Like, he was so strong in my mind and he knew the story that he wanted to tell. So, or he knew he wanted to be in a story. Let's put it that way. So he did walk into my head. But I also asked myself, what sort of story would I have liked to read growing up that I didn't have? And that was a very interesting question to ask myself, because I've always loved watching planes take off and land. I would go out to the airport when I was a little girl, and we'd be picking up family because we had family interstate, to Launceston Airport, and there was a replica of Charles Kingsford Smith's Southern Cross. Now, he's quite a famous aviator in Australia, and I would just go downstairs and look at this plane, and then right next to that, there's this big viewing window right near the runway and the taxiway. So you could watch the planes take off and land, and I was always fascinated with that. So it's something that I have felt very keenly since, the love of flying. I've felt very keenly since I was little. And then on ABC TV, which is our public broadcaster, every night between the end of the goodies and the start of the news, there was a clip of flying to the music, Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines. And I loved that video. I still know the words to that song. I wanted to be a pilot, but I realized I have no spatial aptitude for the type that you need to actually go flying. But I still wanted to be involved in flying and aviation, right? I joined Air Cadets and I immersed myself in that world. So my first experience of positive and negative Gs was in a Caribou, an Air Force Caribou flying over Launceston. And I still remember to this day what that was like. And I would have been about 14 when I first went on that flight. And it was just like floating in the cabin. It probably wasn't very safe. Aviation safety may not have been highest on the radar at that point, but I still remember that, and it made a very big impression. So, all of these things, like aviation is something that I've loved. I joined the Air Force, even though I couldn't be a pilot. I joined the Air Force. I still now work in aviation, and I'm still in awe every day. I go out to a base pretty much and watch, transport aircraft, fast jet fighters take off and land. And what I realized very quickly is that there are not many fiction books for kids that are centered on flying. So I wanted to write that book, and I wanted to be someone who loves aviation, even if I'm not a pilot, to be a person that would write that book. So that's a very long answer, but it's been a long time coming. And it's something that I've really loved and felt very passionate about for a long time. So that's how I came to write this book and why it includes flying.
All right. So you started your page one rewrite. Was there something in particular that you focused on? Because, I mean, I've had this feeling, you and I've talked about it off air many times. The thing about story theory, yes, it's fun, but it's really easy to think that every time you learn a new piece of theory, you've got to go back and start from scratch. Like your book is never done until you know all of the theory and you've put all of the theory in your book and you can't let it go and blah, blah, blah. Like it can be overwhelming. Theory can be very overwhelming. And we don't quite know how on earth we're going to be able to do all the things that we're supposed to do in the story. So as you faced this blank page, was there something that you focused on to get you through to the end of the book?
So I think writing scenes was one of the things that was really key. And you and I focused on analysing scenes and then writing them. And that was really important. I would then have to go away once we had our meetings and write a scene every week. And then I would focus on progressive complications, especially the ones that I forced Jett to make, right? I had to force him complicating his own life. And that was important because in the first drafts, Jett was a very passive character. So things would happen to him and they kept happening to him. So I needed to make sure that he became active and caused his own problems to a degree. But learning to write a working scene is really the single most valuable skill I think a writer can learn. The scenes are the bite-sized chunks of a story that everyone can learn to write. And, I've used our 6-pack, the theory that we developed and the way forward we developed for basic scene writing. And it's now ingrained in my writing muscle memory. So that comes very naturally, but it took a lot of practice and it took a lot of time sitting down and writing. But I now don't have to think about that as much as I used to. So it's a skill that I have learned to develop. And a very important skill. So that would be the number one thing. Learning to write a scene is the number one thing that helped me ahead leaps and bounds.
I'm so happy you say that because I'm working on a training program about scenes.
Yep.
So stay tuned for that. If you want to hear about it, join my inner circle, valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle, and I will let you know when it's out. And no, I did not prompt Melanie to say that, by the way. I really didn't. Okay, one of the things that we have talked about here on the podcast, I think we did a whole season on it, and it comes up all the time, is this whole idea of the force or forces of antagonism. Now, in Jett Cooper, you have a mix of antagonists. There's more than one, and they're not all people. So why did you decide to go that way, and how did you manage to balance them all?
Well, you're right. Like I have 4 human forces of antagonism, 1 machine, and 1 force of nature. So it's quite complicated, but I actually found that really relieving, to be honest, to have many different forces of antagonism, because it meant I could switch things around and keep the types of problems that Jett was having. I could mix it up and make them really different instead of having to deal with the problem of having the same force of antagonism with the same problem all the time. But for the human antagonists, I wrote down their wants and their needs, and I placed them at certain points in the story. And again, that gave me a lot of choice and variety, and I could create a range of obstacles to put in Jett's way. I wrote a list of all the things that can go wrong when you're flying. So that's for my force of nature antagonism, a force of antagonism. And I listed them from least severe to most severe. And then I decided on the causes, and I created the nature force of antagonism that way. The machines or the planes, they're mechanical, but failure rates on different components will determine different responses from a pilot. So the failure of a smoke machine to turn on is quite different to an engine failure, and the process that they go through and the checklist that they go through are very different. However, once an aircraft is in the sky, then the consequences of failures are very different as well, right? So again, this gave me plenty of options to play around with. And the other force of nature that I really focused on was gravity. So I won't talk too much about how I used gravity because I don't want to give too much away. But flying is a constant fight against gravity and drag. And so it was good fun having these range of options that I could use to create obstacles for Jett. And it fitted the story and it fitted the world that I was writing in. So again, it took a bit of time to work that out and to work out what role I wanted each of them to do. But once I did, things slotted into place fairly quickly. So yeah, there's a lot.
I love that gravity is a force of antagonism. But we don't tend to think about that as a force of antagonism. Like if we think about nature being a force of antagonism, it's typically a storm of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
But gravity, there it is, man, and it's just doing what it does.
Yes,
right?
It's not being mean. It's not being nasty. It's just
doing what it does.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
so good. It's so good. Now, one of the things that a story needs to sort of be a breakout book is a world or a setting that the reader wants to hang out in, right? This is part of the thing that has made the Harry Potter series so popular. I mean, we all want to go to Hogwarts. We all want to go to Diagon Alley. That's why they built the great big theme park, so we actually can go there. This is one of J.K. Rowling's superpowers, in my opinion. It's her ability to imagine these worlds and then describe them.
Mm-hmm.
So you already talked about the world of Jett Cooper as being aviation, which is very different than you see even in adult books. And you describe it as Top Gun for kids. So you've got a world that is very specialized, but interesting. Not just aviation, but an air competition. But yet you're writing for an audience who are younger, middle grade, so like 9 to 12 years old ish. And they don't have a frame of reference for that. They might not have a lot of experience, even being a passenger in a plane, let alone flying a plane. So, how did you bridge that gap? How did you approach it?
Well, you're right. Like the aviation world is very technical and it can be very complicated. And I have lived in that world for 30 years. And so I take some of it for granted. So I had to really think about what would be familiar to my general audience and I had to make sure that they were included in Jett's journey. But my ideal readers are kids who are fascinated by flying and know all the terms. So, initial readers who aren't my target audience did provide me with feedback that there were a lot of technical terms. So, I had to really balance the technical phrasing for general readers, but include enough detail so my target audience could recognize their world. And to be honest with you, I had to maintain my own credibility, right? Because it is my industry. So I have to maintain a level of credibility about what I know about that world and make sure that I had terms right and things like that. But I also decided very early on to include some illustrations at the front of the book to help with the world building and to orientate the readers so that they could work out where they were at the air show and also what the racetrack looked like. And I think that that's really important because that starts to give the kids a frame of reference of what I'm talking about, which is really, I think it's really important. I don't think you need to spend a lot of time looking at the illustrations at the beginning, but it gives you a sense of where you are in the world and the type of racing that the pilots are doing. There's also a glossary of terms, right? So that readers who are new to the world can discover things very quickly. And there are instruments and terms that are really common in aviation, but they may not be very familiar to everybody. So I put a glossary of particular terms in the back of the book, so people can go and refer to that if they need it. But where I really came unstuck, to be honest with you, was numbers and measurements. And they were very, very challenging. So I had to develop a system around writing numbers and writing numbers as words because they're different. So I started with writing the words for numbers when they appeared in speech. And then I moved on to measurements. So I created my own style guide for the numbers and the measurements so that I could keep them straight and consistent in my novel. And I also shared those with my copy editor as well, so that she could understand, and it made sense to her. So that was really important. I did get feedback from early readers about the terms, but I considered it. But I also went with my gut, right? Because I've been a kid who loves aviation and I knew the terms. And I decided at that point that I would prioritize my target audience over general readers. But hopefully, I've given general readers enough assistance to be able to help them understand and enjoy the story without leaving them in the dust, especially around technical terms. But you can tell me because it's not your world. So did you find that okay when you were reading it?
I did. And here's the thing. I don't think writers do this. I think it's more agents and publishers do this. They underestimate an audience. They underestimate readers. Again, let me take Harry Potter as an example because it's the same target audience, okay? Just the name Hermione was challenging for children in North America because it's not a common name in the US or Canada. Maybe a bit more common in Canada because it's a Commonwealth country, but certainly not in the US. And so J.K. Rowling actually addressed that in one of the subsequent books when Hermione actually says how to say her name. But the children in the US just saw it and it was Hermy 1. Well, they know who it is and they're moving along. Expecto Patronum, like all of these Expelliarmus, like all these phrases that they just assumed children would struggle with, the children just rolled with it, right? In one of the early, might even be the first book, Uncle Vernon is apoplectic. And I remember reading the word apoplectic in a middle grade fantasy thinking, all right, she is challenging her readers to level up. And if a kid if they don't know the word apoplectic, they can ask a grown-up or ask a teacher or like someone or an older sibling. They might be able to understand the meaning of the word from the context, or they'll just skip over it and they haven't really missed anything. They might not really understand apoplectic, but they know that Uncle Vernon is really mad in that moment. And so they just roll with it. And I think that this is, I mean, now you can't write something that is, so intellectual that even an adult doesn't want to read it or so dry, so it's all about, is this in service of the story? Again, we go back to it. So in the case of Harry Potter, the spells and the charms were all part of the magic of that world, balanced with words like muggles that we could easily say and repeat. And then, of course, the movies came along and then everyone knew how to say these words. In your case, again, it's in service of the world. If the children, they might just gloss over the numbers. That's okay. What they know is that the plane is dipping too low or going too high, or that's what they'll take away from it. So the intensity of the scene is not lost on a kid who is not maybe doesn't have any experience with this. And on the other end of the spectrum is that it might get them interested in it. they might actually go and
Yeah.
Google this. So I just think it's like what you could have dumbed it
Mm.
down, but I don't think that would have been in service of your story. So that is the guiding
Mm.
light when you're trying to make any decision about your story. Is this in service of the story or not?
Mm.
All right. There's a lot of action scenes,
Yes.
flying scenes.
Yes.
Action scenes are tough to write. Yet, in Jett Cooper, you opted to have lots of flying scenes, which are action scenes. And aerobatics, I mean, it's a very visual sport
Mm.
involving planes. So your frame of reference for your reader is not immediate. So how did you tackle that one?
Well, I watched hours and hours of the Red Bull Air Race videos, and I actually narrated those races to myself endlessly out loud. Like I narrated them out loud to myself, and I described what I was seeing. And I would go back and go, no, my gosh, that's just taking me longer than it's, than it's like my narration was longer than the actual video clips. So it took a long time. It took a long time to understand how to write flying scenes and how to give that sense of flying. Once I did, though, it kind of clicked into place. But the thing that I also worked out is that I changed the way that I wrote the flying scenes as the story progresses. So they are longer in the beginning and then they get snappier and shorter towards the end. And in the beginning, I did that because I had to establish the terminology and the actions. And I also had to give the impression that Jett is not as good as he thinks he is, right? So things take a bit longer, they're a bit clunkier. And then the more he flies, the more comfortable and instinctive his flying becomes. And so, what this also does, hopefully, is that the reader progresses along with Jett. So they're taken from just learning about the terms and the phrases to the point where it's just then second nature by the time we get from the middle into the end of the book. And again, I think this is also where the illustration of the flying course helps me a lot. Just that one image does a lot of groundwork in terms of the flying and understanding the flying and where the aircraft and the pilots are on the race course. And it will also help readers have an understanding of the different components on the racetrack. But yeah, it took a long time. And it took a lot of narration and feeling like I was going insane along the way. So it did take a lot of work to do that.
And did you study other action scenes, like from other writers, like Anthony Horowitz or anybody like that?
Oh, absolutely. Like he was my go-to, right? I've got scenes that especially from the Alex Rider book series, because he's such a good writer of action scenes. That I really studied how he did it. And I studied, this is going to sound so nerdy, I studied how he used language. And I actually did a breakdown of where he uses verbs and nouns along his action scenes. And I've highlighted those in different colors just to see how he did it. And I also noted the sentence lengths as well. So, yes, I used him because it is one thing to visually look at flying and narrate it. And then thinking about how do I translate that to a page, and seeing how a master artist does it was really important and very helpful. And I only had to do that a couple of times, like look at the scenes before I could work out and transfer the flying scenes onto the type of action scenes that I wanted to write. That part didn't take me as long. That became quite instinctual very quickly.
Like, this is the type of dedication that it takes. Okay, Melanie, the hero's gift. You mentioned it already, and we talked about it in season 2. I get a lot of questions about the hero's gift because it confuses a lot of people, and it makes them pull their hair out and say, oh my God, I've got to figure this out. I have no idea what my hero's gift is. So how did you tackle it? How did you come up with identifying what Jett's gift would be and how you're going to use it in the story?
Well, that it took me. I really puzzled about this when you first asked me. I didn't have an answer because I'd actually never thought about it. And this is something that I do love about our podcast, that we find things that aren't well known, but actually have a really key, are essential, and have a key role to play in writing stories. But in the end, I came to the decision that Jett is a combination of his mum and his dad. He loves flying and he cares about his mum. And so caring about his mum is his gift. But he and his mum experience, like I mentioned, their grief very differently, and that's the challenge for them. So I needed to make sure that Jett's care for his mum is never too far from the surface. And I do this a few times at the start of the novel. So I really try to not like overtly set it up, but it's there. It's layered in with the scenes with his mum. And although he's furious with her for most of the book, and it is her decision to stop him from flying, he still has moments where he recognizes what he's doing will impact her. Even though he defies her, he still understands at some level that it will have an impact on her. And that point is really driven home at the midpoint shift, right? And then, I had to link all of that to the climatic moment. But I needed to demonstrate that Jett's flying ability and his concern for his mum are his two gifts. And yeah, that took me a while to work out. And in the end, everything that happens in the climax is a result of his gift and the things that happen at the midpoint shift. And it's his thoughts and actions that all change from that point forward that then make him focus and realize what he needs to do. And so that he can use his gift in the end to help him get through the climax.
Oh, I mean, we could talk for 4 hours about what you just said, because you just touched on.
Yeah.
What I want
Lots.
listeners to what I want listeners to really take away from what you just said is how integral the hero's gift is to the overall structure of the story. You might want to just go back and listen to Melanie's answer a couple of times and pick up on all of the things she just said there about how the hero's gift impacts the structure of the story as a whole. Okay. This has nothing. One of my last questions has nothing to do with the structure of the story at all. But I noticed, Miss Melanie, that you use a pseudonym. So why, tell everyone what it is so they can find your book, but why did you choose to use a pen name instead of your own name?
So the pseudonym is Mac Hill, so MacHill. And I chose to use that because I thought that it fitted again with the world. Like Mac sounds a pretty cool name, but it's actually not far from my name. So my full name is Melanie and Cecilia Hill. So Mac is actually the use of my initials. And that's why I use them, because it is my name, although most people don't call me by that. They mostly call me Mel or Melanie. But I did want to sort of make sure that my name, or my pen name, reflected a little bit of the world. And I suppose I did worry that, writing about a 14-year-old boy in a flying world and having Melanie on the cover might not be as accessible. And that could just be me making that up. But it could also be something that I wanted to eliminate. So Mac Hill seemed like a really good name to use for a book about a 14-year-old boy wanting to fly. And so I went with that. But again, like most things, it took me ages to decide. I weighed up the pros and the cons, and but in the end, that's what I went with. So that's what it is. So Mac Hill.
Last question, but certainly not the least question. It's been an 11-year journey, Melanie, that involved a page one rewrite and many late nights and many very early mornings and many hours and hours of studying and decision making and wondering and self-doubt and all of that you've gone through. Now that you are holding your book in your hot little hands, and now that it is on the market and available for readers, how do you feel Are you excited? Are you exhausted? Are you both?
Do you know, I'm actually really excited. I didn't think I would be this excited. I actually thought I'd just be relieved, but I'm really excited, and I'm very emotional about it, to be honest with you. Like, once I made the decision that I was going to self-publish it and I started to work on it, I started to get really emotional about the whole thing and the process. And because this is not many people have actually read the full book, right? And I know, Valerie, you had read that first draft of the first rewrite, and there were a couple of things that I bounced off you every now and then, but you hadn't read the full copy of the book. And I do have a critique partner that I meet with once every 6 weeks. Duncan and I get together and share stories, and he gives me some pretty brutal feedback about things, which is good. But until recently, I'm the only person who has read a full version of this book. And so getting it out and going to a copy editor, and getting it proofread and all of those things, they were big steps. And I was very emotional when I got the feedback back from those experts. And it really surprised me that I was that emotional about it, because I thought I was a bit done and I thought I was a bit over it all. But no, I'm not. I am super excited about this book being out there and being available. And especially, you asked me the question about what brought me to this book. To have a book for kids to read if they like aviation, it is a big dream, and I didn't realize how long I'd been holding on to that. And so, yeah, it's exciting, and I am exhausted. I'm tired, but I am more than anything excited, and I just can't wait to get it to the people, into the hands of people that love the same world that I do. So, yeah. And I was just will say, my kids have come up to me and said that they are proud of me, and that is something that I'm really surprised about. Like, you always, as a parent, tell your kids that you're proud of them, but when they come and say that to you, it's a really very unexpected. So, oh gosh. It's really unexpected, and it's really a lovely thing to have them say that. Yeah.
Oh, Melanie. Oh, that is so beautiful. Well done, kids. Well done. Good job. Well, I'm proud of you too. Very proud of you. You deserve every accolade, and all the 5 stars that are coming your way. You deserve them all of them. Okay, now that it's ready, and we've sort of teased people to pieces now for an hour talking about the behind the scenes of what it's like to actually create the book and everything that you have to go through and all the things that you've been considering. They're going to want to read this book now and see how the rubber's hitting the road here. So where can they get the book? And by the way, it makes a great Christmas gift for all the kiddos on your Christmas list. Just saying.
That's right. Good Christmas holiday reading.
Yes.
And that was one of my aims. So yes, tick, we've met that book. So yes, please. So Jett is available in ebook form on Amazon. So just go to Amazon in all markets and type in Jett Cooper or Mac Hill or Melanie Hill, and it will come up. The paperback version is currently available for pre-order online, and it will be available for sale on the 10th of October. And you can get it by ordering at your local bookstore. The ISBN and more details about the book can be found on my website, melaniehill.au, and on my social media. I'm going to be posting very soon about where it can be found. The paperback can be found online because it's starting to get out there, and it's starting now to be in catalogues, which is very exciting. And you can also sign up to on my website to be notified about the progress of the companion novel to Jett, which will feature Ella. So that's Jett's best friend. So that will be coming out not in 11 years' time, hopefully in the nearer future. So that's exciting to go back into that world and give Ella her own story.
All right. I hope everyone enjoyed hearing all about Melanie's writing adventure and how she has put story theory into action. And I hope you're feeling motivated to get into your own writing room and get your own story finished so that you too can be holding your novel in your hot little hands, because it's worth it. It is quite a feeling. And have a glass of champagne when you do and celebrate it, because you've earned it. Melanie, you've earned it, and our listeners will have earned it as well. That wraps up this episode, everybody. To support the show, please leave us a rating and review and tell your writer friends about us. For more information about our online training, go to storynerd.ca/courses. To join my inner circle, go to valeriefrancis.ca/inner circle. For more information about Mel's book, Jett Cooper, visit her website at melaniehill.au. And remember, story theory does not have to be difficult. It's a tool to help you write more, not less. So take it one step at a time and have fun.